Joining me now are investigative reporters Mike Kessler. He brought the story to Outside the Lines, and Mark Fainaru-Wada. They spent over a year on Conrad Manwaring's trail. So how did you first learn about these allegations, Mike?
Well, it was really the old-fashioned way. I got a tip from an acquaintance who went to a summer camp in the 1970s, and while at that summer camp with his older brother, he said that his older brother was allegedly molested by this man. He thought that maybe it was still going on, that he was alive and well and living in Los Angeles, and so I started digging from there.
And the scope of these allegations is enormous. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's remarkable. It spans 2 continents, at least 4 states. He was in England for much of his younger years. We know of 1 victim there, but in the U.S., starting around 1980, is when it seemed to really take off, according to all the people we spoke to. There's over 40 victims spanning 40-plus years, and this man was at a number of high-profile institutions, including Syracuse University, Colgate, Caltech, and he trained a lot of people on and around UCLA as well.
Over 4 decades of alleged abuse. Mark, how did he finally get caught?
Well, it's the story of him getting caught is just crazy. There's a couple of components of it that are almost improbable. The first is a guy who says he was a victim back in the 1970s, has a blog. It's a vacation blog. It's just his personal blog. He posts on this blog about 6 or 7 years ago. It's just a random thing. Doesn't mention Conrad Manwaring at all. And then randomly, somebody posts about a year later on that blog about Manwaring. And at that point, Manwaring had virtually no presence on the web. But these guys who had had this experience with Manwaring over the years began to look him up and wonder what had happened to him. And the next thing you know, this network built up of guys who were claiming they had been abused by him over this 40-year span. Ultimately, that, as Mike says, gets us onto the story through his tip. We start doing some reporting. One guy tips off the FBI. That leads to an investigation. It ultimately leads to Los Angeles. And what happens there is you have one victim who was victimized, says he was victimized about 10 years ago or 12 years ago. He goes to the track to confront Manwaring, and at the track, it turns out there's a kid there who had been molested, says he'd been molested 9 hours earlier. To that point, the LAPD, which is investigating, has no cases to look at. Suddenly, this guy comes talking to us at OTL, and then we let him know LAPD has an investigation, and then he goes to LAPD, and now, ultimately, there's a case.